Because the percentage of women who graduate in science fields is so small, one must wonder whether negative experiences in the higher education environment contributed to the decision to not complete tertiary education. One of those negative experiences may be sexual harassment experienced at university. Gender-based violence is a scourge in South Africa, and sexual harassment forms part of this behavior. In a bid to improve how sexual harassment and gender-based violence are addressed in institutions of higher learning, the Department of Higher Education introduced policy framework to address gender-based violence in the post-school education and training system.
So bullying and harassment is, I think, very much present in academia as well as in corporate, and but it's almost invisible. So a lot of people will not say if they've been harassed or bullied by a senior, a line manager or something like that, for fear of it trickling down back to you.
I have witnessed bullying and harassment in the workplace, and specifically it was bullying and harassment that was towards one of my female colleagues. And this was between her and her superior, which went on to a point where working became very difficult. And it was always just the bullying and the harassment and the words that were being said to her in the background. Being able to take those things to trusted people and having trusted structures within the company is what actually assisted to alleviate this and stop the behavior. But there are always risks associated with that, and not everyone wants to actually take the route of reporting any bullying and harassments that we see in the workplace.
I have an experience of being bullied, not really bullying, but then it's related to bullying at work here in the Department of Agriculture. So when I arrived to some of the farms, most of them, normally they just look down on you. Like they don't even hide it. You can feel it that you are not welcome. But then the moment you start sharing your experience, the moment you start explaining what you are there for, that's when they start realizing, oh, this person is more knowledgeable than we thought.
So I think in terms of harassment that women experience, it's usually a matter of being told, maybe given extra work or things like items like that we can't say no to. And if you do say no, then it becomes a little bit of an argument and a disagreement. So sometimes women are taken advantage of, let's say. That's not obviously in itself harassment. It can become a disagreement between a woman and a line manager. And sometimes the line manager is also a woman. It doesn't have to only be men.
I think there are many different types of harassment that women face in the working sector. And one of the biggest ones that we experience specifically, maybe if I speak in the mining sector, would be a sexual harassment. And it comes in different ways. It can be words that are used. It can be inappropriate gestures. It can be touching that are experienced on a day-to-day basis.
So it involves us saying no and being allowed to say no. Otherwise, we will continue to be harassed and then being judged as when you do say no.
So it's not really bullying, but then it's more related to, because it makes you feel uncomfortable talking to them at first. But then the more you start engaging with them, the more you make them understand that you are there to advise them as an agricultural advisor. That's when they start listening. But then the moment they see you, I don't know, maybe they expect someone different. They expect, I don't know.
I think women continue to experience bullying and harassment in the science community and even in the wider society, because when we show up at work, whether it is in a scientific career or it is in any career, people come as themselves at work. And if those cultures and habits and the things that they do are allowed within society and it is accepted, it will carry on and it will perpetuate.
So women in science who voice their opinions and are louder than others absolutely experience this is a negative attitude towards them. A man who does the same thing is assertive and, you know, doing his job. So this is definitely something that has to change.
I think, like with any new policy that is introduced regarding bullying and harassment, or any policy for that matter, it is very vital that it is not something that we just stick up on a wall or we put on a file for reading just so that we tick boxes and we check any specific legal requirements. It is important that we have actual examples and actual cases and things being done about bullying and sexual harassment in the working places. Any policies that are introduced are implemented regardless of who a person is, whether they are a superior, whether they're in management, whether they are working at anywhere in the organization, that everyone receives the same treatment so that we actually feel the pinch of making sure that we behave appropriately in the workplace and outside of the workplace.
In the case where a female colleague is senior to a male colleague, that male colleague will find it difficult to even respect that person, so it becomes a bit of even a toxic environment.
So the new code of conduct against harassment, or how to deal with harassment, I think is a really promising element that's been put in place. I have not seen it in place yet at our institution or anywhere else, but if it can deal with people being able to report harassment and not being victimized afterwards, that would be key.
Bullying and harassment goes unreported, and it goes back to the point that I had made earlier, that bullying and harassment goes unreported because people, one, are scared of the risk involved. Will I lose my job? Will I lose my credibility as a person if I go and report it? Will people not take me seriously anymore if I go and report something like this?
So harassment specifically of women most likely does take place more. I think especially because women, if we voice our opinion, we get taken out for it. Whereas if a man voices an opinion, he might be listened to. So I think, and those sort of situations can often become harassment if it goes further down the line. If you keep voicing your opinion and someone keeps fighting against it. So I think it definitely does happen. Bullying and harassment, woman to woman, definitely does occur. And I think that's because woman to woman are more, they will say more to each other. A man might back off.
They are trying to avoid maybe drama. They are trying to maintain peace in the workplace. So they keep on experiencing the harassment, keep them to themselves because they put others first instead of putting their own emotions first.
Or he'll say, this is the end of the story, whereas women will repeatedly fight back.
And I've seen bullying and harassment affect women from all walks of life. You find that people are no longer motivated to actually perform at the level they need to be performing at because of things that are hanging over their heads regarding bullying and harassment that they might be experiencing at work. I think bullying and harassment between females is something that we are still seeing in the science community as well as in the greater society. And that is because that as females, we do not support each other as much as we need to.
Male masculinity is definitely has a role to play in science. Again, it becomes from a position where a man might be in a line manager type of position and whatever he says goes. And then women will often say, okay, well, he said it and that's the end of the story. However, if a female is perhaps in charge, then people are more willing to say something against something. And I think that's very valuable, having a female that people are willing to say something to. So now we twist it to the other side, that maybe it's an advantage of people wanting to talk back to a female because things get said.
I think women in science that show up as assertive or feel they have to behave, maybe if I can say in a masculine manner within these authority positions, goes back to the fact of why are they acting in that manner in the first place. I think there are certain prejudices and stereotypes in the working world where you believe that as if I'm going to be an effective leader, I need to behave in a certain way. I cannot use my feminine traits or the way in which I am to be able to be assertive or actually just show up in my feminine way to get things done. So a lot of women believe that they need to change who they are so that they can be heard, so that they can be listened to in the world that we work in. And I think that those structures actually need to be broken down.
The practice of preventing the harassment of women in a workplace, I think the awareness is not really that much, because I'm also not aware of the practices that we need to follow to prevent the harassment of women in science. I think we need to do more of those awareness so we can be able to tackle all the issues, so we can be able to reach out a lot of women that are being harassed outside, so they can be able to say whatever that they are faced with and share the experiences, and in future they will be able to prevent that from happening.
So upward harassment is very much something in place, and we often talk about it within our meetings at the university. Students have become more empowered in their information. Nowadays, the access to information is so accessible that students are immediately willing to voice their opinion. So there definitely is very much a strong upward harassment situation happening more recently in universities. Students are very much more aware of what regulations are in place and what their rights are. But having access to information, much easier access to information nowadays, enables students. And they definitely are more vocal. And definitely a female lecturer is much more attacked, let's say, by students who are struggling. I don't think that there's mechanisms in place that are good enough yet to protect lecturers in these situations. And this is something that should definitely be looked into in future.
I think bullying and harassment in an upward motion is something that I have seen, and most of the time it is because you will find that your younger people in the organization will feel that your superiors are not good enough for that position, or they think they deserve those positions themselves. They simply do not respect people based on the value that they bring in the work they do, but instead look at the person based on the fact that they are a male or a female instead of the value that they are bringing. And hence they feel that they can bully and harass those people as well. And that is why it's purely respect and the perception that they have that a man might do the work better, or I might respect a man better if they are in that position than a woman.
So I do, having women in positions of leadership definitely can assist with how harassment and bullying is dealt with. I think there'd be a little bit more sensitivity to what someone is actually feeling, and it's not an issue of, oh, you're a woman, that's why you're complaining. You definitely have to have both sides. But I do think it must be a balance. You don't want to have only women in charge, because then it always becomes an emotional sort of structure. But there should definitely be more women in charge at higher levels, so that people are listened to, that there's people, and also that people can feel okay to express what their harassment was and what they're feeling.
I think there is still pressure for women to behave and come across in a specific manner in the world that we work in. But those structures are slowly but surely being broken down, whereas we've got programs where you are able to come as yourself at work, fully as yourself at work, promoting people coming from different backgrounds, people that are different genders, people that are different races, and bringing those programs and that education into the working world is actually insisting in breaking down those barriers. I think if we had more women in science in leadership positions, it would definitely start making us look at the world in general in a different manner. Start making people think differently about the value of a woman, as opposed to saying, I'm a woman, this is where I'm supposed to be working, or I can't be in a leadership position. And that influences indirectly or directly the amount of bullying or harassment that happens, because now you are starting to change people's mindsets just by placing people strategically in certain positions in the organization.